Welcome back to Incremental, the continuous improvement podcast. This is our practice edition where we try to show the process of implementing a continuous improvement culture and kind of the stumbling blocks along the way and the wins and all that.
Yeah. Hopefully wins.
Hopefully some wins and discussing the improvements we made through the week and sort of the lean concepts behind them.
Yeah.
Quote:
People don't like to think. If one thinks, one must reach conclusions. And conclusions are not always pleasant. From Helen Keller, apparently.
Through Eitan's long list of quotes. Thank you, Eitan. Kind of funny.
It's also like I often struggle with... How do I say this? We've talked about it before, but like when starting a new thing, like that point at which you have to just start doing something is like committing to something that might not be right or pleasant or any of these things.
Right. If you keep it in a planning phase, you'll never find out that it's a terrible idea.
Yeah. And so I do find sometimes there's just temptation to just like kind of be like, oh, I'm just going to leave that till later. I don't really want to know what it means for my life.
Or like firing off an email. And you're like, once I send it, so it can like kind of sit in a draft form. But I think where this maybe is most applicable, to lean is, I think, it's hard to maintain for me an openness to criticism. I think when someone's like, hey, why are you doing it that way? And being like, well, for all these good reasons that we've thought of because we run our business well. And instead of being like, that's a really interesting question. I don't know, what are your ideas? Or I think it's hard to, again, because like we don't want to be wrong or we don't want the conclusion to be like, oh, wow, I don't know. It's good to feel right.
Right. Like hearkening back to your tumbling thing.
Yeah.
Like not everybody can sort of fess up and be like, we've been wasting our time for the last 2.5, 3 years.
Right, which is 100% what's happened.
It's not a pleasant conclusion.
Yeah, unless you focus on the pleasantness of not having to do it and the fact that by building a culture that does that, you end up over the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not pleasant. And so I think it's easier sometimes to avoid it. I think a lot of people run into this problem when trying to build a lean culture.
Yeah.
I think both of us, one thing we can't really speak to very well, unfortunately, is, and people write in to ask us, like, how do you transition a company to lean? Because we've both done it. I mean, yes, sure, we did it, but it was like a team of like 1 or 2 or 3.
Also, I don't know if we've done it. I think we're doing.
For sure. But I'm saying we weren't aware of lean and started a thing and then became aware of lean and we're like, can we do this?
Yeah.
And went through that process or are going through that process.
Yeah, I think like still if you come into my shop, I'm not sure if you're like, this is a lean shop.
Yeah, mine either. Yeah.
Although someone did come by the other day and they were like, you're kind of into lean, huh? And I was like,
say more. What are you noticing?
How did you know?
Yeah. So, good quote.
It is, yeah. I don't have a lot for this last week because we spent an entire day painting our new shop instead of doing other things. So maybe you should lead us off.
Sure. Before I jump right into
the
content for this, we had a fun gathering last night. Unfortunately, you weren't able to attend.
Was not.
Beers with manufacturing nerds in Seattle. And messing around with robots and whatnot. Some very interesting tidbits. One from Adam is basically around this idea, which I don't know why this never occurred to me, to compare write a subprogram on the CNC to compare the tool length that is output that you programmed with in CAM with the tool table in the machine. And if they don't agree, just alarm out, which just seems great. Like if you forget to load a new, to change out that tool, it would probably alarm out.
Interesting. that assumes that your tool holder is accurately modeled in CAM.
Yes, and that is the trouble in setting that up. But if you get that set up, that's a cool idea. Because there's no probing involved. And so he also mentioned the term, I think he said elegant failure, which I liked. Because I was like, oh, is that to avoid failure? He's like, no, it's for elegant failure. Right? So it's just like, instead of crashing, you stop.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't really, that would be the difference between QA and QC. Like, quality assurance would prevent that problem from cropping up or reduce its likelihood, and quality control is sort of checking, did that thing happen? So this doesn't reduce failures. It just reduces catastrophic failures, kind of. Anyway, so that was fun. Also, some really interesting processes around op2 machining, which is probably not the purview of this podcast. But anyway, it was a lot of fun talking about robots and automation and all that. So we'll be doing it again, hopefully.
Robots.
Yeah, I need a robot. So to jump right in, I mean, the biggest one probably is we eliminated our tumbling.
Yep.
Which we discussed last episode.
Huge.
It really is. A lot of minutes were spent, not only minutes like actively spent digging parts out of the tumbler, which we've talked about. Like, you had that counter of like, how many did we put in? Did we get that many out?
Yeah.
Like, there's many ways of sort of improving that operation, but even better to the whole process is eliminating it, which is not always an option, but for what us turns out it is.
Yeah.
So that was great. Definitely, I've been way more conscious about making changes and the sort of potential effects that could have. So like, it felt like a much more, I feel like earlier in my in our lean journey, it was like, oh, a new idea, great, full send, like, let's implement it. And then you're like, oh wow, it has these new effects. And so now we've definitely taken a much more sort of like, how can we, like, what is the process for figuring out if this is an improvement that, like, I feel like I used to improve our production, and now I sort of prototype new ideas that then we try and then we implement into production. And that was not just like, I don't know, that was just hard lessons of, okay, well, this morning, let's change up how these things are held in our assembly area. And then it's like, oh, wow, we're scratching all of the parts. And you're, and then, anyway, so that was great in terms of the effect on, reducing, I don't know, wasted human potential. But the bigger one, no, I guess they're both big. The other thing is just, it cuts fully 2 hours out of our total lead time. And so
that's huge.
Yeah, huge. And so like, now, because of that reduction in latency between telling the CNC we need parts and getting those parts that are ready for paint, means that we can drop our buffers in that location substantially. Like, we used to have this issue where if we needed to paint something tomorrow, we could run the CNC all day today, but if it went into the tumbler at night, it was sort of like the next morning it still had to be rinsed, degreased, dried off, then sandblasted, then gas out, then you can paint it. And so it was hard when you arrived the next morning. They weren't really ready.
Yeah.
Whereas now they could be like, it's so quick to get them in the oven ready for sandblasting, and the sandblasting process is like 8 minutes, and so it just takes out about an hour of time when we get to the shop of parts to parts being ready.
Yeah.
And then also, if we do a full day of machining and they're parts we want tomorrow, every part that comes out of the CNC, instead of having to go into the tumbler 2 hours in the tumbler then come out, it just immediately progresses to the next step of like degrease, dry, and it sort of flows a lot better.
Yeah.
Because that was sort of a bottleneck, and we had one part, one tumbler, and so one part at a time got tumbled, and so like, you're just like jamming this.
Yeah.
It was pretty hard. So
it's fantastic.
It's gone. Thank you, Alec, for the push.
Let's see, the few things we did. Whoops. Can't see. So I updated our universal macro with the option for the mini tray layout.
Okay.
So we used to have a universal macro that worked on one tray. Then we changed the whole layout to this new tray thing that could have mini trays at each station with a bunch of small parts in each one. And it required some new logic. And when I first did that, I updated like an old early macro for those parts that we'd run on it.
Gotcha.
Which was relatively straightforward. And then I went to update the universal one, which had like a lot more variables. And it proved to be extremely challenging, actually.
Interesting.
Mostly because of the mental load thing, where we're not good at holding a bunch of different numbers in our heads.
Yeah.
And there was like conflicting variable usage, like variable numbers were like, because I'd written them at different times and I just kind of like started at 0 and went up. I was having to like sort through this thing, and I tried copying and pasting one into the other, and that didn't work. I tried copying and pasting one portions of the other into the one. It was just like my brain was just like exploding. Eventually I went through and just rewrote the universal one with the new logic.
Gotcha.
And added variables as required.
Oh, cool.
So in lean principles, that's just like trying to standardize more and more and not have so many different versions and make the update process a little quicker, because the universal one does definitely work better.
Okay.
And has a lot of refinements to the pick and place routines. And then the other thing I'm doing is putting those routines directly into the program instead of having them be sub-program calls.
Gotcha.
Because as we start to get more and more parts, it just becomes this like crazy tracking process to make sure that you're calling all the right programs and renaming them appropriately and stuff. And then I actually haven't run it yet, but I finally did the program call for the actual part program with a variable.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Nice. So, someone had to do it.
I'm not sure if it's going to work yet. I'll have to run it in a couple days here when this
very cool
part comes up. But again, I think that's just a error proofing, basically. So what we're trying to avoid is having to dig through the program to find the place where you tell it to go get the correct part program. We're just going to have a spot right at the very top that you just punch in the number of the program you want.
That's awesome.
And I think the way I did it's going to work. Basically, I just named the line number to match the program number that you want. So I am only giving an option of 10 different versions right now.
Gotcha.
And if you call that, it tells at a certain line to go to that line. That line calls that subprogram that matches that number.
Yep. And then jumps to the end.
And then when it comes back, it tells it to skip all the other ones and go to the next part in the program.
Huh. Very nice.
Yeah, we'll see if it works.
Yeah, I've been thinking
there'll be tweaks.
A lot about this on for our automation. I think I mentioned as we increase the number of pieces we make.
Yeah.
We're starting to run into similar problems. The bigger one for me, or I think the big reason for me to move to more like universal program that everything is running on instead of like copy and like right now I just duplicate it and then write everything specific to it instead of really just having one that each part program calls and then runs its own part, is all these like weird subroutines. Yeah. And I would love to, like, I have this thing where when I load the vise, the gripper then turns 90 degrees and nudges the part back to center. I would love if that was like a toggle I could do in my, like, do I want to do that when I load it? Do I want to, like all these things, because when I make an update right now, it is really labor intensive to then go back through all of them and
make the changes
and make the propagate those changes across all of the parts we make. And then the other issue is if you don't, is there like cross compatibility issues, or like if you want to make a tool change or change out the, like I'm running into this where I think we need to change our gripper soon.
Yeah.
And so if I do that, there's sort of this clocking that I've done.
Yeah.
For the rotation, whatever, to get it parallel to the vise.
It's going to be different through every program?
No, that is a macro variable that's set at the top of each one, but I still need to go through every single program and make sure I
edit it properly.
Yeah. Instead of just do it once in whatever tool table and call it a day.
Yeah.
Or like in one program.
Yeah.
So I think like this, I think it's something about like standardization increasing the rapidity of improvements for me.
Yeah.
Like I can just work on one program, whereas right now I improve one part. And then if I really like that improvement, I only propagate it once I have the same issue on a different part.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. It seems like, there's so much room for error with the file management and so much labor.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself going back and editing lots of different things that are all effectively the same, try and figure out a way to make them one.
Yeah. Or get a relational database.
Or that.
Okay, this is a big one. I don't know why it took me this long to think of this. It is not an improvement I made, but it is an improvement I want someone else to make. Namely on the Fusion team. If anyone on the Fusion team is listening or someone knows someone, I don't know if, you don't use Fusion, or maybe you are now. But you might get the same thing when you select the height, and it'll give you a warning of like your retract plane is above your top plane or whatever.
Yeah.
Basically, when you're machining, you need to tell the tool how far down to come, and there's different planes, and they're meant to be in a particular order.
Yeah.
Two things. One is color code them in a progressive way. I don't know how to do that, like from red to green or something. So it's like
they are color coded now. Aren't
they are color coded, but I don't know if it's I can't figure out, like there's no stack up where you're like, oh, that one's out of place visually. So I think they could be color coded in a way that was clearly a progression. B, the color, the cell where you would edit the number of that height
could match the color,
should be color coded, because now you're reading it, then you go read the labels in the thing, and it's just like an added step instead of like the second it says, because the warning says retract plane this, and then you're sort of reading the side ones, and then what I normally do is drag one of them around and see which which number changes, and then I'm like, oh, it's that one. It's just an annoying fiddly process that just seems very straight. Like if step one would just be like the boxes are color coded the same as the tiles on the screen. Those frames on the screen. Anyway,
it's not an issue I really have in HSM.
Interesting.
Maybe the defaults just
work. It's not frequent that I have this issue. But when I do, it just seems needlessly fiddly.
Interesting. I questioned whether to put this in the list, but I think it counts. We painted our new shop, which you could say is just a given, but also we could have not painted it. And
I don't feel like that's a given. I've seen a lot of shops.
And we kind of went back and forth on whether we should take the time to do it. But I'm really glad we did. I think it's going to make the working experience there much better. And I think it's not just better, but like we're going to be able to see more effectively. I think it's going to be much better for any customers that visit the shop. Like I think there's going to be not just quote unquote quality of life improvements. I think there's going to be tangible benefits from having a clean and bright shop. So we took a day last week and got basically everything that could be painted. Very cool. Yeah. We didn't paint the break room yet because we're still deciding what color.
It does. I feel like I've expressed this rant on this podcast, but like quality of life improvements, you could argue two ways. One is that, like you're sort of saying, I think it's a shortcut for like, I don't really feel like quantifying this, but it is good. The other would be like, it's worth quantifying because it gets you a deeper level of understanding. Yeah. What do you think? So like there's the perception of something. What is the perception when a customer walks into a painted shop?
Perception of quality and professionalism.
Yeah.
There's an expectation that if they decide to give you their money, you will give them what they want in return.
Right.
Whereas when you walk into a dirty, funky shop, there's a
question mark.
There's a question
needs
mark.
to be like
You'll
disproven.
Be like, well, a bunch of people said these folks were good, but it's kind of dirty in here.
Yeah.
What's the situation?
Right. And then on the side of, I've sort of been thinking about like visual clutter for sure.
Yeah.
In my shop, there's like no resting place for the eye, really. It's like all clutter. Not clutter, visually noisy.
Yeah. Interesting.
I don't know how to quantify the benefits. Is
Uh-huh.
it just that you notice when things are out of place more? Is it that you're building a vibe that is sort of self-perpetuating where like if it's neat, you kind of will bring it back to that level of neatness? Or like
I think there's that. I mean, my primary thing was just that it's going to be easier to see.
That's beneficial.
Because there's a limited amount of light in the shop, and having a giant brown wall absorbed a lot of that light.
That makes sense.
Whereas now we have a giant white wall, which reflects a lot of that light.
Yeah.
And then a concrete wall that was same. Yeah. Gray, just kind of absorbed light, was like just busy to the eye.
Yeah.
Now white and reflects the light.
That's nice.
So, yeah, I mean, I do think, when there's a baseline of cleanliness and neatness, you want to sort of maintain it more than if there's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. We, as I mentioned last episode, improved the pin cutting process.
Yeah.
So this is just like blanking them to put them into the CNC. Spent a little while on this. We've really started using a lot of pins. The previous process, I mean, we haven't fixed the desperate levels of over processing, but we have decreased like the ease. The safety is much better because like cutting pins on a bandsaw is like
not
ideal. We started cutting so many that like your fingers would hurt after cutting. It was sort of like you would do it once or twice a day instead of like once or twice a week.
Yeah. And
so that was just became a little painful, unbearable, not a fun part of the day.
Yeah.
And then the pins weren't like, if you cut all the way through a pin, that last little bit would like grab the blade. So you'd sort of cut, and then also they'd like fall all over the place. So it was actually what we used to do is slot them till there was near like very little material connecting them, and then cut a whole bar, and then you'd carry that bar over and break them all off. And that result, firstly, it's just like annoying.
Yeah.
And then also every single one had a sharp burr on it.
Yeah.
And so these have no burrs. Anyway, really big improvement. Recognizing the fact that it's still a bad process, that operation is greatly improved. And I think we will say, like, I don't know. Sometimes you just have to make things a little better to get through. And that's what we've done.
Is the, sorry, I'm jumping to problem solving. Is the end finish good enough that if you just chamfer them, you could use them?
That is a question that will be answered quite soon. Our spring supplier reached out about supplying us with pins made from coil stock that they'll blank out on their spring making machines, I think. So with a shear.
Yeah.
And then they put them in a chamfering machine. My concern is not machining the ends of the pins. So we'll see kind of how that looks. They said they can tumble them. So we'll see if that looks better or worse or different.
Yeah. And then straightness an issue or no?
No, basically.
Yeah.
They can hit. I mean, he mentioned like, they can make them very straight. In fact, a lot of things, like a lot of bars do start off as coil and then they're straightened. So,
yeah.
And our bars are only like an inch to an inch and a quarter long.
Yeah.
So yeah, over that length, the straightness would have to be pretty wonky.
Yeah.
Remains to be seen. I'll let we'll see when they send samples.
We yesterday decided to alter how we set our a-axis 0. So traditionally we've done it the way kind of the control is designed to do it, which is you find your 0 point with an indicator, then you just punch in that number in your work offset as the 0, and the machine corrects accordingly.
Right.
I can't remember if I mentioned this on the podcast, but when we started using the V3 probing macros for G54.2 rotary fixture offsets, if that number is negative, which we sometimes convert it to a negative so that we can use travel limits, the macro creates weird numbers in that value.
Gotcha.
Which made me nervous. So in order to circumvent that, we are going to the method that Greg showed on Instagram a bunch of years ago, where you actually reset the encoder 0 to the position that you want 0 to be.
Nice, which I think is better anyway.
I'm not sure what the downside is. It has been frowned upon by a couple of folks, but I haven't heard a good sort of explanation of why it's actually bad.
It might be actually bad only in perception, because I think people don't like to reset the zeros of the machine. That said, I've done that a lot of times. When I had the z-axis issue with my servo, I probably did it 10 times, maybe more, and it came out, it was very repeatable. I mean, they do it once at the factory and you're doing it the same way. So it's like, I don't know.
I do think so.
I would imagine if you did something crazy, you could maybe have knock-on effects, but there's no like mechanical limit on those on the mechanism anyway. So you're essentially telling the computer like, hey, start here instead of start here, which was equally arbitrary. Yeah. If someone actually knows what they're talking about, please do write us.
So initially that was the motivation, was to be able to use those macros, but I think actually it's going to be very good moving forward, because that's just one more point where someone can forget to enter a number.
You were doing it like every time?
Well, anytime we would need to set a new work offset potentially, or take the rotary on or off or anything like that.
Right.
So now it's just going to be 0 and the machine can't get confused.
Yeah. This harkens back to standardize, I feel like.
Standardize.
Instead of updating... Oh, we had this with our gripper lengths. Instead of updating your A-axis and remembering to do it every time, you can go, can we make this the same, and then never touch it again? Yeah. And the answer is yes. Yes. That's awesome. We had we still have the issue, I think I mentioned, with our gripper finger lengths. Right. Those should absolutely be standardized. That said, it breaks a very important rule of always update the tool length when you load a new tool into the CNC. That's my concern.
You can still update it.
Yeah, I know I won't. If it's the same every time, you'd be like, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe it's a point and call kind of a situation.
Could just be a compare.
Could be. What do you mean?
Like you could have it
go visually check or something?
Written on the side of the gripper and just compare to the number in the tool table.
True. Right. So there is a step.
Yeah.
A placeholder step. That's true. We have been playing with branding. Trying to get our packaging on par. Getting our brand on par with our product. I think there's sort of this weird discrepancy currently.
You're like the reverse of every other U.S. company that sells a product.
Yeah, we're selling essentially what is typically it's a very common item that is pretty low quality. We have made a very high quality version.
You're selling a Ferrari out of like a backyard, like alley garage full of like 60-year-old junk.
Yeah, sort of. So
sorry,
like
that was maybe a little harsh.
If you've received a package, it's like in a plastic bag with a label. My thinking was kind of like, that's not the value we're bringing to the table. And so like in terms of de-risking the general business, concept, early on, I wasn't like, okay, the packaging is make or break. And if it is, then probably I'm not moving the needle enough in terms of delivering a better quality product.
Yeah.
Because the premise was basically we're going to make much better buckles that don't really consider... I mean, right now, the buckle industry is like so driven by cost that I think it's gone to an extent that just like they don't deliver, in my opinion, they don't deliver the function. And so I was kind of like, okay, what if we sort of cost, yes, we're going to try to drive costs down, but really we're going to focus on like delivering a great value. And then the packaging is kind of like pretty, it's a baggie. It's a plastic bag with a sticker on it. And so trying to bring that up. And then also I got some business cards last minute for some event, and they're so bad. They're not, I mean, if you look at them, they have the information, they have the logo, whatever, but I just really felt off brand because like the whole brand is like elevating a very basic object. Mm-hmm. And then I hand you a business card that's like actually kind of a crappy version of a business card.
Yeah.
Visually, the feel of the paper, all of that. And so just like, I don't know, like tipped over something in my brain where I was like, the full customer experience should, I mean, maybe it's in line with your white wall, right? It's like we should be communicating our values with every touch point, kind of.
Yeah.
And right now we're really falling short on that, I would say. So, so working on the branding, branding is hard.
It is. Yeah.
So that's been interesting. And then, you know, I've been trying to take some of the lessons in designing the future. Uh-huh. Around like synchronized convergence of like the progress of the different aspects of the project. And so like taking some of the early concepts and like yesterday I engraved them in the metal because that's like a really critical part of like, does our branding engrave well? Oh yeah. Like, do we have a version that looks good on the buckle at that scale? Like scale is a big issue for us because we have really small products. And so I did some tests on that yesterday.
With the new branding?
With like an early version of the new branding. Yeah.
Machine engrave or laser?
Machine engrave. And it looks, there's definitely some updates to be made, but so that's been interesting, and I think it will be fruitful. I think it's really holding us back in terms of some bigger bigger like retailers. Yeah. I don't think we're setting our retailers up for success on that front. Yeah.
Makes sense. Cool. That's all I can remember this last week. I feel like we've been doing a lot of little tidbits here and there. Yeah. But I keep forgetting to write them down because we're too busy.
Same. I've been actually thinking in terms of meta improvements. I've been trying to think of a way to have, like, opening this spreadsheet on my phone to take a note every time I make an improvement is too disruptive. Uh-huh. And so I don't know if it's like a pad that I carry around or some way of recording things that's a little... Because when I get really busy, it's just hard to remember in the moment. I have a couple more... been updating some more tool paths. I don't know what's going on. Like our roughing mill is making crazy noises, and their tool paths we've run for a year plus.
Did you get some shorter?
I have not, tools? But again,
Yeah.
We've been doing it for a year and a half. So I think you're right that we are not perhaps doing a good thing. But it was working for so long. I'm wondering if it was a bad grind or something, or a different grind, or I don't know. Anyway, so I've been updating some. There's a lot of updates that I've wanted to make anyway. So once I'm like updating the whole toolpath, I may as well sort of dig in and improve things. One thing that's very interesting is like we've gone to a non-roughing mill for some of the moves because it's a stubbier tool and it is way nicer sounding. The chip volume out the back, I would say, is like 3x or 5x. Wow. Yeah, it's really substantial. Like grinding them down into like tiny shavings, I think really messes up people's tanks. Like we were talking about, anyway, so like they really fill up the tank, but we have that pre-filter, so it doesn't really matter. They just sit on top. We vacuum them off now. Yeah. Thanks to our nifty Freddy. Yeah. Yeah. That thing has been great, by the way.
I mean, it's curious, even with the little parts, that you're getting significantly larger chip volume.
If you look at the chips, I mean,
Yeah.
the chips from the rougher are like really, really small.
Yeah.
And then the chips from our, like if you do a 1/4-inch step down and you're kind of hauling ass,
Yeah.
like the chips are,
They're chunky.
yeah, they're 1/4-inch long or more,
Uh-huh.
and they have like an arc to them.
Yeah.
So they don't really sit. They do drain coolant way better.
Yeah.
Like the fines really hold on to coolant, but I don't know how to compare those. Yeah, so did that, and then also we had this hissing that I could not find in the shop.
Was that what was going on when I stopped by that day? You were like freaking out.
Yeah. I was like, where's that sound? And every time I'd move, it sounded like it was coming from a slightly different location. It was very hard to find. I finally located it. It was a ruptured air hose, like a soft air hose.
In the machine or like a 3/8?
No, up in the paint area.
Huh.
Just had a slit in the side of it, so we were just like dumping air all day.
Oh.
Which, credit to the compressor, it didn't seem to care. It probably liked it. It likes continuous running. But yeah, so found that and replaced that. It was kind of a hectic day where I was like running way behind schedule, and so it was an interesting one as I was fixing it. I don't know. I mean, like, again, this whole thing is like filled with contradictions, but like the slow down to speed up thing hurts sometimes.
Yes.
Like I absolutely could have left it for another day when it wasn't hectic, but it just felt like wasteful, and I don't know.
Yeah.
So I fixed it.
Good job.
Thank you. Maybe. Yeah.
Anyway,
Anyway,
the proof's in the pudding, right? Like you can always kick fixes down the line.
that's the thing.
And
I
if
guess.
you still get your work done and now you don't have to think about that extra thing,
yeah.
I feel like it's worth it. I mean, assuming you can handle some hectic days, because that part does have a real wear and tear on an individual.
Yeah, and an individual's relationships. Yeah.
I don't know what you're talking about.
No, it is tough. I think like, again, like, very apparent costs or the other way around, depending which way you want to phrase it. Hidden upside or hidden cost and very apparent upside to stopping what you're doing and making a fix.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, it's easy to put off. It's easy to keep kicking those cans down the road, and it's hard to see the cumulative effects, I think, on the business.
Yeah.
But it does over time just feel so much easier to get through the day successfully.
Yeah.
Without like random things cropping up. Like I don't know. Like things start getting more and more organized and less like falling apart, and every step is actually 6 steps. And because like to get to this tool you need to move that one out of the way, and then I don't know, like these are vague examples, but yeah, I fixed an air hose is the point. And now it doesn't leak.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anyway,
hopefully that was helpful for you all.
Maybe.
We're doing our best to try and kind of talk about the underlying things more than just the random details of our specific shops, but
I think we walk a funny line of like, if it's too vague, it's also no
Makes
longer
no
like
sense.
a practice edition.
Yeah.
I've noticed that with like on YouTube and stuff, sometimes people want to glaze over the specifics, and you're like, I am here for the specifics. Give them to me, please. Why are you skipping them? So anyway, let us know what you think. More specifics, fewer specifics. Drop us a line on our Instagram, Incremental CI, and we will get back to you.
Indeed.
Or people have been emailing us too, which is also
true.
good.
Yeah. Actually, which we didn't put on. We haven't set our emails.
No,
For some reason, I'm
we
sort
should
of hesitant to, but they're easily findable if you want to.
I set up a podcast email, so let me figure that out, and we can both.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right on. You can also additionally find me at _MFG on Instagram and likeandprecision.com on the internet.
And you can find me at austere_manufacturing on Instagram and austeremfg.com on the internet.
And we will talk to you next week.
Bye.